Very good.
Excellent, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Hoskin, Chair of the Housing Advisory Board. Welcome to our monthly meeting. Today is June 24th, 2026. We'll start with roll call. Brian Selby is not here today. Chip Hennessy.
Here.
David Garland.
Here.
Lauren Shevitz, also not here today. Philip Ogren.
Here.
Sheriff Feinberg is going to be zooming in at 7-ish. Okay. And then Max Lord is our planning board liaison. And then Eden Bailey, thank you, is our guest tonight. All right, so we'll go over the agenda. First, we'll approve the minutes, and we'll have time for public participation on matters from the board tonight. We have Eden will be presenting housing for older adults, needs and options. We'll do HAB chair and vice chair elections. We'll make a decision about canceling the August HAB meeting. We'll talk about the quarterly update to council, also discuss a recap of the team building exercise, and then we'll talk about the HAB work plan review. Any matters from the staff, we'll have some time for final thoughts and suggestions, and then we will adjourn by 9 tonight. Hopefully everybody got a chance to see the minutes for the April meeting that Tiffany sent out. Are there any comments or corrections? I'll make a motion to approve them. All in favor? Oh, yeah. Somebody want to second it? Sorry.
Second.
All in favor? All right, perfect. Any opposed? Motion approved. Public participation, is there anybody that's online with us tonight?
See, we have one member of the public that would like to speak. So if you
Okay.
want to share their rules home.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Okay. Ready the rules.
We don't tell it first. Okay, so just a overview, the city's engaged community members to create this vision for public participation to essentially support staff, the physical and emotional safety of staff and other community members. If you want more information about the process and the details, you can go to this website. But the following are examples of rules of decorum, and these will be upheld during the meeting. So all remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, or other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And finally, participants are required to use the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online.
We've got Mark here. Here's Mark.
Howdy, folks.
Hello.
Mark. I'm a bit at a disadvantage here because I'd like to hear what's going to be said about senior housing. It wasn't really in the agenda, so I'd like to comment depending on what's being said. So I don't really know how to handle that other than saying we need more of it. But yeah, I'm a little frustrated because I just don't know how to frame my comments given what you're going to hear. So that's all really, I guess. Unless you can give me a hint, unless you know.
I don't know, Mark. Sorry, I have the same agenda, just housing for older adults, needs and options. But I welcome you to either contact one of us on HAB with specifics afterwards, or you're always welcome to come back to our meeting next month and follow up.
Well, I might well do that. I
Okay.
will say though, yesterday, the city of Boulder did host a senior services discussion at the West Aging Well Center, which I attended, along with almost 50 people. It was quite the gathering of people from around the community. And as you might imagine, housing was an issue. Wasn't the only issue. There were quite a bit of issues on finances, food, and other things. And but a number of people spoke about the frustration of the lack of affordable housing. Big surprise. Who would have thunk that was an issue? But it is. Um, so I guess the question is what HAB can do to facilitate more of a focus on senior housing. But again, I have no idea what you're going to hear, so I will have to wait. But maybe you all might want to speak with the county on aging and aging agency. The Boulder County Agency on Aging, I believe is the name of it. And they facilitated the meeting. They took a lot of notes and they heard from a number of folks on housing issues. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
That's our only public participant.
We'll close that portion of the meeting. All right, matters from the board. So I guess Eden will go ahead and dive in with that.
Oh, thanks.
My name is Eden Bailey. I'm the Division Manager of Older Adult Services in the Housing and Human Services Department of the city. And so this board reached out and asked if I would present and on specifically that kind of a housing thing. And I said, yes, I'd be happy to. So yeah, I can't help myself. So I'm going to update you or maybe introduce you to an initiative that Housing and Human Services is doing, led by Older Adult Services, and it's called an Age Inclusive Strategic Plan. And some of you may have heard about it. There's been, I think, a press release and it's on the webpage, but you may not have heard about it. So this is a great opportunity. Like to start with the demographics. That's always often a driver for how we plan and how we make changes. So the State Demographer's Office has done a projection that Boulder County population between 2023 and 2050 will see a 9% decrease in birth to 19-year-olds. A 6% decrease in 20 to 39-year-olds. But when we move into the 40 to 59 category, we're beginning to see a 15% increase, 60 to 79, a 22% increase, and then the 80 plus population has a massive 202% increase. How do we plan for that? How do we respond to these pretty profound demographic changes? So that is what got the attention of leadership and the decision to make, decision to create a strategic plan. So 2023 marked the first time in Colorado history where adults 60 plus outnumbered children and youth under 18 years of age. And the shift is multi-generational. When I point out by 2050, a lot of people are focusing perhaps where we are now, which is the aging 60 plus would be those born into the baby boomer generation. But if you think about it, in 2050, the oldest Gen Xers will be 85 years old. And at that same time, the oldest millennials will be 69 and the oldest Gen Zs will be 55. So this is an intergenerational, multi-generational aging. And the sheer numbers would make a difference. So those born into the baby boomer generation were about 76 million. Those born into the Gen X generation in the US, the Gen X generation are about 65 million. Millennials, 70 million. However, that generation has the largest immigration in that age group. And so they number more like 74 million. So we're looking at pretty high similar levels. And then the Gen Zs were 72 million. So that's not like there's going to be a drastic drop. There's going to be a fairly steady aging through 2050. And the Age Inclusive Strategic Plan is an opportunity to plan and respond to this unprecedented population increase. What are the impacts of an aging population? Well, there's lots of opportunities. As an aside, I teach an Understanding Ageism. I do a presentation on that and have presented it to more than 150 city staff. And so it's a very, ageism is institutional, it's relational, and it's internalized. It's one of the few accepted isms that we have left. If you were to go into a grocery store or a store where there's cards, you would not see any specific groups made fun of, but you will see that for older adults, especially in the birthday section. So there are lots of contributions that older adults make in our community: participation in the workforce, volunteerism, caregiving, intergenerational exchange, and contributions to the local economy as consumers and investors. There's also challenges for aging successfully in a community: living on a fixed income. We are living longer with 2 or more chronic conditions, so living on that same income for longer is a challenge. Housing, transportation, elder abuse, ageism, social isolation, and the functional limitations that or functional disabilities that are associated with aging. There's also healthcare and long-term care needs. So we decided with this strategic plan that we created a charter, and I'm going to go over the process of that charter with you now. So the first thing we did was we created a consultation committee, and staff from Boulder and other community partners, including partners from the county, convened in May to review the charter using the city's rapid response racial equity assessment tool to make sure before we even got started that there was racial equity built into it. They gave some feedback, we incorporated it and got the thumbs up to go ahead and move forward. We plan on reconvening this group to review the final plan to make sure that we haven't missed anything. We're also, so then the first step is there are 4 domain groups, and these domain groups are similar to what you might see as the 8 domain groups in the World Health Organization. They're called the 8 domains of livability. And we have it down to 4, which is what we used when we did the Lifelong Boulder Initiative, based on Dr. Cogg's recommendations of making a more concise domain groups. So the first one is housing, and some of this language is from the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. Subject matter experts are going to meet several times per month to create goals, strategies, and measurable outcomes. And with housing, an age-inclusive community includes stable, accessible, and affordable housing throughout the community with a full spectrum of housing types and price points that enable people to remain in the community as their needs, incomes, and household compositions do change over time. More recent Pew survey noted that at least 93% of people want to remain in their homes as they age. It's where they've lived their lives. That's where they'd like their lives to finish up. The areas of focus are going to be affordability, availability, accessibility, and design. The transportation domain, which ties in very closely with housing, as you all know, because where you live and how you get to and from that is linked. But age-inclusive features for transportation are a focus on mobility and access, including public sidewalk systems, good connectivity and accessibility. In addition, public streets and intersections should be easy to navigate and safe to cross. And private property owners would be encouraged to create and maintain features that meet the needs of older adults, especially access. So this area of focus is mobility and access. The last two domain areas we have are community living and support services. So again, the city of Boulder is a college town with a lot of young people and a community where many are approaching retirement or are in retirement and would like to age in place. So this demographic creates some diverse needs. So the areas that we wanted to focus on were outdoor space design, volunteer opportunities, workforce participation, and safety and security. Support services are pretty much what they say. As the older adult population increases, equitable and easily accessible services to support aging in place need to be established. As I said before, older adults overwhelmingly want to remain in the place that they call home, and that services like case management, information and assistance, in-home care, chore services, affordable and accessible legal services, mental health and adult day services become as essential to meeting this need. So those are the 4 areas where experts are going to sit down and come up with goals, actionable strategies, and measurable outcomes that the city can look at and work with to ensure that we are a community, in the words of AARP, where an 8-year-old to an 80-year-old can age comfortably and successfully. So how are we engaging our community? We've got subject matter experts, but then there's this other piece. So community engagement for older adults and their family caregivers. As part of this process, we will also be getting feedback from caregivers. This turned out to be advantageous timing because the Boulder County Area Agency on Aging is required by their governance, which goes from the state to the federal government, to do a 4-year plan every 4 years. And the next one is due in February of 2027. Part of that plan is gathering data, but also doing what are called community conversations. The State Unit on Aging only requires 2 or 3. Boulder County has worked with the municipalities and other partners, and we are collectively doing over 30. There's 5 in the city of Boulder. And so there's a set of 4 or 5 specific questions that are asked to every group, whether it's in person or online, so that there's consistency of what's being asked. And then those will be transcribed and analyzed and put into a format where we can access those answers to see what the trends and needs are. We've already had 2 of them, one at the East Agewell Center and one at the West Agewell Center. And I will say that in 2020, we rebranded to go from Senior Center to Agewell Center and from Senior Services to Older Adult Services, because the data is overwhelming that the word senior is perceived with a very negative and ageist perspective. So we looked at the best research, and older adult, it was the most obvious term to come up with. And aging well seemed to just make sense. We'll have one this week also that's online in English. And for the Spanish one, we had one on June 17th online, facilitated in Spanish and then translated into English so that I could understand what was going on, because I do not speak Spanish. We're going to have one tomorrow night at the West Agewell Center, also in person in Spanish. How we put this effort out, we used a lot of different things. We made English and Spanish flyer, and we got permission through the extensive efforts of our communications and engagement department. We reached out to the 5 manufactured housing communities in Boulder, and 4 of them agreed that we could go and flyer the neighborhoods, and we did. We distributed over 1,000 flyers. We also got permission to do the same at San Juan del Centro. We have done a Let's Talk Boulder podcast, which has not aired yet. We've done a press release. We did a Channel 8 interview, which has aired. There's a City of Boulder webpage to this project, and there are social media posts. We're also using some past data that was done in 2022. The CASOA is the Community Assessment Survey of Older Adults. And based on data from 2022 in the housing, this is a statistically valid survey that was distributed throughout Boulder County to adults 60 plus, and then the data was disaggregated by municipality. In the City of Boulder, the question was asked about availability of affordable quality housing. 92% responded it's fair or poor. Having housing to suit your needs, 30% said it's at least a problem. The availability of accessible housing, and in this instance, accessible is talking about things like step entries, single floor living, wide hallways, wide doorways, basically easily wheelchair accessible. And 85% said fair or poor. Maintaining your home, 54% said at least a minor problem, and a variety of housing options, 80% said fair or poor. So in housing, and yet other data will also show in the same survey, people love living here. People want to stay here. Their quality of life is good. It's just that housing creates a little bit of an issue as you begin to age. So other older adult feedback that we had heard or has been made clear to us is some people have talked about feeling discriminated against affordable housing residents by the market rate residents. When they're mixed in, they feel that they have been singled out as somehow not okay because they have an affordable unit next to somebody who's paying market rate. No HOA fee regulation, an inability to downsize due to lack of affordable options. Continuum of care retirement communities have a buy-in range anywhere from $150,000 to $1 million or more, and monthly rates of rent range from anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000 per month. So that's not an option for a huge number of people. There's also a request for vetted home share options. One person said, I worked my whole life to pay it off and now I can't afford to maintain it. People have mentioned their over income for BHP, but under income for a market rate. And quote, the goal is to leave the house to my children. How am I going to do that? So the final project is going to be the Age Inclusive Communities Strategic Plan. And it's an opportunity to acknowledge the contributions that older adults make and to create a plan to prepare for successful aging in community, given the profound increase of older adult population. The final plan will be presented to City Council in early 2027 with the request to adopt it as a city priority. And the strategic plan will be available to city departments and community partners to include and incorporate in their various strategic planning efforts. And then before I open it up for questions, some of you may or may not know exactly what Older Adult Services is or does. And so we are part of, as I mentioned, Housing and Human Services. We offer all adults 60 and over a safe and welcoming environment. Our programs and services are delivered in 2 AgeWell centers that honor the needs and desires of older adults. And we're committed to supporting an age-inclusive community through our work on anti-ageism, lifelong Boulder, mitigating social isolation, and encouraging community engagement. Our mission is to inspire and empower older adults to age well through community connection, learning, and play. We've got one at the West AgeWell Center on the corner of Arapahoe and 9th, and one at the East AgeWell Center where we are co-located with Parks and Rec in the East Boulder Community Center building. We have case managers who provide short-term assistance. We can help with assessments for home health care, financial assistance for qualifying individuals for basic needs, assistance with benefits applications, caregiver supports, referrals to community resources, and we do options counseling on things for housing, long-term care, transportation, healthcare, food assistance, and more. And we also provide programs that help people prepare for being able to age in their community. Our other programs, more of our lifelong learning programs, we have health and wellness that offer programs for mental, physical, and emotional well-being. We have health supportive programs. We have programs around technology, creative pursuits, social connection, and aging in place programs. The West Agewell Center is also the location for Meals on Wheels Boulder, their Eat Well Cafe, which is the congregate meal site. Most communities have them. One is located for us in Boulder. There's one at the Longmont Senior Center, that's Meals on Wheels Longmont. And then typically other senior centers or age-well centers have some kind of a meal program there. Meals on Wheels Boulder is our tenant. We don't offer the program, but they are our tenant, and they offer that so that people are consistently offered Monday through Friday a lunch they can afford. And that would be all for me.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I'll just jump in here to talk about the actual housing options for older adults in the city. So I'm on Eden's housing domain, a part of the age inclusive strategic plan. And part of this conversation, I think there were some curiosities about like, what are the options? What are the units? What are the, we're always looking at the affordable units, but try to offer some comparison of the market rate units as well. So we had very little time and no resources to do this research, so it's not comprehensive. But we did want to provide like the known entities out there we know of and how many people they serve. So all in all, in the city, there's about 1,700 age restricted housing units in the city of Boulder. The age restriction varies depending on the development. Some are 55 plus, some are 62 plus, some are 65 plus. We just lumped everything into one group here. BHP Boulder Housing Partners has invested heavily in housing options for older adults. There's some examples of this that I'll point to in a minute, but overall in the city, we have 670 big A affordable units that maybe, there may be a few more out there, but big A, so that's permanently affordable, for the affordability protected by a deed. And then over, somewhere over 1,000 market rate units. So I added this beautiful graphic from ChatGPT, which there was some lessons that we had to teach ChatGPT about age discrimination. But essentially, there's this barbell. This is not dissimilar to the housing options for other age groups and other populations in the city. There's options for affordable homes in the city, age-restricted affordable homes, and then there's certainly lots of options for luxury or like upper end market rate housing, but there's not a lot of stuff in the middle. So some of these examples, we just wanted to, again, just kind of create a list, show you those developments that are out there. So the affordable housing options, the top two, Presbyterian Manor and Trinity Commons, run by Element. Everything below is a BHP property. So they do have quite a few developments throughout the city that specifically serve older adults. And then the market rate options here. So one thing to note about the market rate option is like not all market rate options are equal. The Academy and Fraser, and you probably know more about the spectrum of here, but there's a huge spectrum of what that market option is for older adults. But again, there's quite a few different units, different developments throughout the city, specifically serving older adults. We also, I've been hearing a lot about the pipeline of what the units that are coming in to our community that serve specifically older adults. And so I just wanted to highlight some of those here as a way to kind of, to show that the work is not done. It's not stagnant. Those numbers will be growing. I'm sure you all know something about this. Presbyterian Manor is expanding their development by 60 units, lots of debate, lots of procedural problems with this, but they're seeking to expand their affordable. So these would be 60 affordable units right next to their current development. So they're in the process of doing that. The county sold their property on, Iris and Broadway to the Academy last year for $26 million with the intention of the Academy developing older adult housing community there. I think we can safely assume that they won't be affordable. But again, the numbers, those units, those homes for older adults will be increasing. So this is Fraser Meadows currently has a 700-person waiting list for their housing, for their homes. So they're looking to expand into a property, I think like just adjacent to where their current property is. Details of this I don't know many details. I don't think many details are out there about, maybe a little bit more about it, but about like how many units, what type, who they'll be serving. But that is to address this waiting list and this obvious demand for their services.
I can see that place from where I live. So I studied the plans at one point and showed up for public comment somewhere. But
Okay. And then Alpine Balsam. So Boulder Housing Partners is developing one of the parcels at Alpine Balsam for older adults. So they're adding 55 affordable rental units to their profile or to their portfolio of housing, age-restricted housing units. I took this picture just today because it's like behind that mound of dirt is where essentially this development will be. In that development, so 55 units, and then they are carving out 14 of those units to be dedicated to older adults with disabilities in partnership with a community provider. And then I'll just end. So I've talked to this group before about our Bloomberg-Harvard City Leadership Initiative. During that track, this is like a innovation track. We followed this very specific path to public innovation. We did a lot of community engagement during that whole process. And I mention it here because housing options for older adults was a theme that came up over and over again. Major issues that we heard were downsizing homes not an option for lots of older adults, especially homeowners. Lack of middle income retirement communities. There's lots of other options here, but maybe not so much for middle income. And then just generally constrained options to either age in place or to move to somewhere where you can successfully age in place. So along this, so we did this we had engagement, we did ideation with the community, and then we tested ideas. So we came up with some ideas throughout that process. And one of the ideas we called prototyping or testing was, all right, so there's a lot of these homes that older adults are looking to, we heard downsizing wasn't an option. So how can we as a city incentivize, encourage downsizing? So we tested this idea with, at our age well centers. Can the city explore? This was the kind of the prompt, and we went from there. Leaseback programs or reverse mortgages, like city sponsored, to help older adults stay in their homes the way they can, and then help incentivize or encourage to leave when they're ready. And we did not get great reception. There was a vocal opposition of older adults in the community that the city should have any hand in this to be involved in any way. So we were we felt that there's a little bit of tension. We hear that downsizing is a problem, but man, the city should not be involved. And so we went another way in terms of we took that prototype, we took that feedback, and we said, let's not get involved in that. So the other way, which was quickly mentioned in one of Eden's slide, was the concept of home sharing. Again, I think I've probably mentioned this. We hosted like a home sharing roundtable in February. But the idea is that older adult homeowners can rent out a room And the city can facilitate that process by partnering with a nonprofit organization to make sure the matches are safe, vetted, there's background checks, there's mediation involved when necessary. And then the trade isn't just for payment. You know, maybe the homeowner needs extra income, but there's also tasks, chores, or just like generally some, you know, companionship in the trade. So we're actively pursuing this now. We're working on identifying funding for it, and we'll put out an RFP later this year to hire a vendor to host the home sharing program with an builder. And that is all I have. Questions, discussions?
I have a question about, you just said that you're gonna put out an RFP looking for a vendor or not, whatever you call them.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of options out there? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, we have. So there are options. There's like companies at a national level that do this, and then you buy into like they create a specific search for the city. I'm sure there's like a name for this in business and like the technology to do it, but that's essentially you pay the vendor to make sure that Boulder comes up in searches. And home sharers and seekers can find houses there. And then there's a local organization based in Denver that does home sharing specifically within Colorado, and definitely less of a just like a platform and the tech for it, but more of a social work aspect of it to make sure that these matches are vetted and that they're going to succeed. And yeah, I'd say more social work focused.
And there's typically a cap on the rent, that it's not an excessive rent of the room.
Yeah, I think it's like $800.
Mhm.
The roundtable that I went to in February that she mentioned was really informative and helped me kind of understand how complex the problem can be. There's kind of in the middle, there's just people who have a lot of house and maybe some extra needs, and they want to get matched with somebody, and they come and live and everything's hunky-dory. It's all kind of, you know, kind of simple. But if you kind of just think about like someone who has more needs or more financial difficulty or a house that's dilapidated, or, you know, so then the aspect of having a social worker who can kind of assess and help people navigate these more difficult situations. Anyways, just there's a spectrum of different kinds of things that come up.
Not as easy as it.
Not all of
Not
it.
as
I think
easy of a solution.
I think some of it's
as it
easy and some of it's hard, is how I would say it.
And they tend to look more at the 80+ population as a more vulnerable population that might need more interventions than perhaps somebody who's maybe 65, still in the workplace, but kids live in another state, would be nice to have, you know, this room. You know, it's just different circumstances all the way through, but it's an interesting concept.
It does seem like more condos or more townhouses, more smaller, denser units would benefit an aging population. I just think of my own parents and my grandparents who all live in or died in Florida. And my parents have recently moved from a house into a condo because it's what they wanted. Like, their kids don't live with them. They don't want to take care of a house, especially in Florida where it requires a lot of maintenance. And I think that's a common feeling among a lot of older people, that they like the option to live into something that's smaller and more manageable. And then in terms of affordability, I mean, that can be affordable, or they're just moving to a smaller, much nicer unit. But it also frees up, like if someone's 65, 70 and moving from a single family house with 5 bedrooms into a 2-bedroom condo because they don't need that space, that frees up housing for younger people. And that's sort of a supply we need. I remember during the last presidential election, Kamala Harris said, like, we need to make sure that all seniors can stay in their homes. And my thought was like, then where are the millennials going to live? Like, we're not ever going to get a house. And I don't think I mean, you don't want to force people out of their house, but I do think there should be sort of a policy around making smaller empty nester housing. And I think there's market demand for that. And it frees up housing for the people who need the bigger house, who have kids living with them. And that seems to be a shortage we have in Boulder. I mean, there's a lot of small dense units for the college kids that I imagine older people do not want to live in. But I don't think we have a ton of like nicer, newer, smaller housing that people who own single family homes would want to move into necessarily. And I don't know.
What was the complaint that people owning houses that wanted to downsize had about the available options?
Yeah, thank you. So the intent or the origin, I would say the origin of our prototyping session or this testing we did was this exact idea. It's like, you're living in a house with 5 bedrooms, you don't need it. There should be options to downsize. So how can we like marry those two things? And the main complaint from the community engagement we did around that idea was that people essentially want to just stay in their home.
They just like.
They just want to stay in their home.
Well, the government's not going to force them out. Like that's.
Well, it's been, how do you, like, I think the.
And I don't think the government has to incentivize. It's like, is the option there?
Yeah, the goal of the session was to identify like, what incentives can we play? Is there a role that we can play in like the behavior change or something like this? And we were just told like, stay out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is like, if you own a house in Boulder that's worth $1 million and you're in your 60s, you probably have a lot of equity. Maybe you own it outright. You're probably not eligible for any of the BHP properties, and you have no interest in living in any of the like free market affordable properties. It's like, how do you take that $1 million house and live in a $1 million condo?
There's no point at that point. The point of downsizing used to be that you would be able to have your equity, purchase something less expensive, more useful, and then you would still have that equity to invest. And especially if you had children, I would say, so let's say you are a millennial and you want a house, and then suddenly the millennial finds themselves at 75 and there's this like, come on, time to get out. You've put your life into a house, you've maybe remodeled. These are the memories where your children were raised. There's a whole bunch of emotion attached to it. And you're also hoping to, at some point when you pass, that house will be sold and your children will get that equity. That's their inheritance. There's a lot that goes into that whole, do I need to downsize or do I not? Some people can afford, I know people who are wealthy enough that they have handymen and they have a gardener and they are just perfectly fine because they can hire the help that you need. They also have enough investment that their property taxes are not particularly an issue. It's people who perhaps bought a house here 50 years ago when it was affordable, and they're living a little bit longer than they thought, and they're not able to maintain the house. They don't have the funds to maintain the house, but the house is worth a lot because it's in Boulder. And what would be the advantage of selling that $1 million house to buy an $850,000 condo? There's not a lot of incentive to do that.
Yeah, perhaps not a financial incentive. I think it's more like a lifestyle. I just look at my parents, like they like to travel a lot and they don't want this house anymore. They like having this HOA that basically takes care of everything so they can leave for months at a time. You know, if you have a house, especially in Florida, where you have to cut the lawn every 3 days, it's like, you know, so that's a big, I think, selling point. And I wonder if there are people in our community. I mean, obviously, again, the government can't push someone out of their house. Like we're not going to do that. But like, if there are people who want to give up the house, is there options for them? And I don't know if there are a ton of options for like, you know, kind of I'd say like higher end, smaller, denser condo townhomes. I know there's some, but it just doesn't seem like a big housing type.
Well, that's where the flexibility piece comes in. That's where the options come in. Some people do want to downsize and they can't because there's not really anything there's not a lot of options for downsizing that's affordable and accessible. Some people don't want to. I think there's a variety of people, just older adults are no different than anybody else on the planet. Different income levels, different desires, different needs, different cultural backgrounds. Lots, they're everyone just adding 20, 30 more years to their lives. So having the kind of options to downsize if you want to, that's affordable, to stay in place if you want to, and maybe home share to, how do you do that? But if you do want to downsize and you do want something that's more, that's a little more manageable, like you're talking about your folks, there needs to be, if that's true, they need to be accessible. And a lot of times the 2-story townhomes, there's stairs. I can't tell you, I just spoke to a woman the other day who's 83, and the condo was great. It was an affordable sale. It was great at 60. At 83, going up and down the stairs is not so great. So, and a lot of thought needs to be put into what is, if you do want to downsize, what does that look like for the longer term? Because you're saying at 65, what if you lived to 90? That's a long time in that
And, like,
condo.
I live in a naturally occurring affordable condo complex, but like it has stairs. And like you said, if someone's 80, I don't know if that's the great choice. I mean, you might be able to handle it today, but what if you fall or have a medical issue? My place was also built like 50 years ago. I'd imagine that condos that are built today probably have elevators, and they're more accommodating.
Well, not within the home itself. If you have a
Not in the
two-story
home
condo,
itself,
yeah.
but if you're in a 3rd floor unit and it's flat in there, that's probably more accessible. If there's an elevator.
I'll just say that I bought a condo this year and looked at a lot of listings and went into 10, inside the units. And we were contemplating, we're buying this thing in our 50s, how long will we own it? And what will this look like when we're much older? And we were thinking, well, it'd be nice if it was accessible. And I don't think there was a single one. There was maybe one ground floor condo in the bunch, but
Because
yeah.
most of the condos in Boulder are old.
yeah, and there's a flight of stairs involved,
Yeah.
or multiple flights of stairs involved. So it's a real issue.
The situation you described, where someone has a lot of equity in their home but no cash flow, and that's where reverse mortgage becomes a really useful tool, perhaps, that they can leverage that equity to pay the property taxes or the handyman or the gardener. And I think, I don't know if it's the government's role necessarily to be doing reverse mortgages, but I think if there's an education piece, maybe.
The county does have an education piece about that, but they don't do it. You have to go to a private.
Because I think a lot of
to do
people
that.
don't really
Thank you.
know what those are, and I think some of them are kind of like predatory and not a good deal, but if there was an education piece that could make that tool available to people in that situation, that doesn't involve creating any new housing, that allows people that have built equity to stay in their home, which is what
Right.
it sounds like a
I
lot
do
of people
think-
want to do.
And we
I
do
do think
refer
that
people to
aspect
that
of
program.
it is covered by the private sector. There are plenty of banks.
Maybe not
there's
the
a
education
competitive-
piece, though.
Right, but there's banks in a competitive market for reverse mortgages. And ultimately, like the city of Boulder doesn't want to be involved in foreclosing on it.
No, I don't think they should be in that business, but again, maybe a lot of people don't know that that's a tool that's out there.
Can I add, when we did talk to several like bankers, financial folks within the city with this idea of reverse, there's like nothing inherently predatory about reverse mortgages. It's just the companies that manage them are not always, but and so the feedback we got from them was like, yeah, this would be a great tool and this is why it could exist, but there's like not a lot of trust when older adults go down that go down that path, it's like 20 calls a day. All people are knocking on their doors to participate in this. So I think there is like this the great option. How do you do it? How do you incentivize it? Can the city be involved in that? Probably not. But so I think that is we tried to explore this space, but it wasn't well received.
And I have a question about the very first slide that you had, which,
The barbell slide?
no, demographic, it was the demographics.
Sure.
So I'm curious, how does this compare to the rest of Colorado or really?
This is a trend that we have, that is happening. There are other cities that are experiencing, counties that are experiencing this as well. And again, that other slide that I had that said for the first time in Colorado, so statewide, the state demographer said this in 2023, it was the first time in Colorado where adults 60 plus outnumbered children birth to 18. So this is something that is not new. In fact, I can't think of the exact name of the document, but at a federal level, there is a plan for addressing an aging population. At the state level, there's the Colorado Multi-Sector Plan on Aging, which is what are the goals and strategies to address the increased population of older adults. It's kind of the first time this has happened where this many older adults are aging in place or just aging, and what's following are similar numbers of generations that are aging.
Americans are getting older, like on average. We're all getting older, but
If you're lucky.
yeah, or you die.
that's the option.
But I've heard like, there's a lot of countries, like I've heard Japan and some of these European countries that have like serious problems that like they just don't have enough people to take care of their population. And I think the idea is in America, the solution to that is we just open our border up and have more immigrants when it becomes a problem, because historically that is something we've done. We've taken a break as of recently. But in terms of Boulder, like when I look at this isn't shocking to me because, you said like older adults are like everyone else, but one difference is that older people on average tend to have more money than younger people. And
Is that true?
yeah, 22
No,
year old.
I'm not asking, sorry. I'm asking that, these guys who are like
Experts.
Eden anyway.
Well,
Is that
yes,
true?
And that's true for a couple of reasons. If you're 21 and you've worked for 10 years, how much money do you have?
Right.
If you're 21 and you're now retiring at age 68 or 69, you've worked for a lot longer. You have accumulated that wealth. This is nothing new. This is the longer you live, the more money you make, the more money you have the opportunity. The longer you live, the chances are you might have also inherited some wealth from someone, parents die. That's just a cycle. And so generally speaking, older adults do have more accumulated wealth than younger people who are just starting out. That's
I just wanted to make sure we weren't making that assumption. I was.
Well, but
No, is that true?
I think another statistic that you can comment on or not, but I'm under the impression that by age demographic, the millennial generation is measurably poorer than the boomer generation before them were at the same age.
I know that there's data around that. I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with it to be able to do a good comparison.
But I think the point I'm trying to make is if you're 25 years old and unless you just inherit a bunch of money, you can't afford to buy a house in Boulder. If you're 55 years old, you probably still can't afford to buy a house in Boulder, but there's a better chance, and I think the reality is when we're in such an expensive community to live in, it's more accessible to older people who've accumulated wealth than younger people. And that's why we're seeing our schools decline in enrollment. Like Boulder's sort of becoming an attractive haven for older people because they're really the only people who can afford to live here. You come until 22 when your parents are paying for your lifestyle, and then you leave and you can come back when you're 60, when you can buy $1 million house. And in the interim, you have to live in Greeley or, maybe somewhere in southern Larimer County. And then if that's what you want, or you can be in your 30s and 40s and live in a small place. I mean, that's just Boulder for you. And that's kind of our housing supply problem here. And how do we combat that is to build more housing. And I think that benefits everyone. And build denser housing because we don't have limitless space. So
is that what you see as a potential solution? Like when you talk about asking city council or saying to them, like, housing for older adults needs to be a priority. What does that mean? What do you envision?
Well, that's what we're in the process right now of hammering out with the housing domain group. We have housing subject matter experts. We have Holly, we have people from planning and development services. We have folks from Boulder Housing Partners sitting in on this to say, what is realistic? What is a goal? And you can have a very lofty goal. Goal number one, ensure all older adults have access to affordable, accessible, design-friendly, etc. housing. Then come the strategies. How do you make that happen? And how do you make those strategies actionable? And how do you make the metrics associated with those strategies accountable? And who are your partners? That's what we're in the process right now of trying to determine what are the best options. We've looked at some of the national goals for housing. We've looked at Colorado's multi-sector plan. We've looked at some other regional areas outside of the state. What have they done? How have they done it? And trying to come up with several goals that could be actionable. At this point, we're remaining open to hashing it out. But there are limitations, of course, to all things. So trying to come up with something that is, I would say, pragmatic, useful, respectful, but pragmatic. That can be done.
With the sharing housing option, you said that there's people who have expressed interest in having this service. How did you contact those people, and what were the kinds of things that they said? Like, where's the demand for that? How did you gather anecdotal or statistical data on that?
We have not gathered statistical data,
Yeah.
certainly none. The anecdotal data has come from a lot of sources. I would say most recently, so I've been doing some just talking with different members of faith community, like leaders of churches and synagogues, and they've actually expressed great interest in this, with the logic being the older members of their congregation often reach out to them for this type of support, and it is not them that they cannot provide that support, but they can make these connections really easily amongst members, and they could facilitate it. But having an organized, vetted process that felt safer than just word of mouth is something that they do find interest in. And then these community conversations, it sounds like it's been coming out. So it's like we've not done this widespread engagement or statistical, but it seems like every conversation we have, something about home sharing is sprinkled in there. So we're just trying to be responsive to that.
And one thing that I found interesting with the community conversation is the interest in home sharing. One person did follow up with me who had a horrible experience because it wasn't a person who was vetted, and they're afraid to try it again. That's why vetting is so important to them. But the one thing that came up several times was the interest in the intergenerational connection in home sharing. There's just that's come up over and over again, whether it's in home sharing or whether it's in some other type of programmatic or service related activity, is an interest in being able to interact with younger generations. Some people, it's any age, but a lot of people were very interested in like, that college age connection.
I think there's a lot of opportunity in that for Boulder. I have 3 friends who are my age who've lived in an older woman's house for 5 years in the basement. And I go over there and I hang out with her because she's like a retired lawyer and talks about like I get a lot of advice from her. And I think she enjoys it too, because she's like kind of, mentoring a younger attorney, and it's worked out very well for them because it's affordable and she benefits from it because they help, pick up stuff for her because she's less mobile. And we live in a community with, a lot of older, wealthier people who own these unaffordable houses. And then young people in their 20s who I think are a little more flexible with where they're willing to live, or they're looking for a more short-term, housing option. So I think Boulder actually is probably one of the best places to like explore home sharing more.
We'll quote you on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question is like, what is it that the city can do to facilitate that? And you mentioned earlier mediation. When I think of mediation, I think of like people in lawsuits trying to settle. But I think this is like a different type of mediation, which is just like, a little friendlier, like someone is upset because someone's coming in making too much noise. It's not necessarily like court adjacent. How do you kind of mediate in that context? And I know the city has its like mediation services. I think maybe something more specialized and geared towards like how.
Think of it more like social work.
Yeah, or like,
I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
is.
We
as
get
opposed-
referrals for a lot of our clients who are struggling with landlords. Landlord-tenant issues are a strong component of the city's mediation program.
Right. I'm very familiar with that. I'm just thinking of like, that usually comes up in like the eviction context. I'm thinking more like, how do you get people to bridge the gap on essentially being roommates? Almost like an RA type role, as opposed to like, how do we resolve this eviction dispute and when will you move out by? But I guess it could come into play.
I have a lot of confidence because we've also referred people to mediation when we have caregivers and care recipients. An adult child is convinced their parent needs to be doing this, and the parent is like, I don't think so. And they're in an impasse. We've referred them to the mediation with the city, and they've had some successful resolutions with that. I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for mediation with, and you might have another perspective, but
No, I think what you mentioned, it's like, I don't know who mentioned actually. There's just a level of like, you don't want to have a match that has been made blow up the first month because a dog is barking too much, or whatever that conflict may be. And so you want to have some avenue that isn't legal adjacent,
Right.
that helps just resolve conflicts. And that is one of the roles of the.
I think an obstacle, like our laws have changed our state laws have changed in the last 5 years to be much more tenant friendly, which has worked out well for like, people who are tenants in corporate complexes. It's also a lot more like burdensome for landlords to evict people, which again is good if you're like a single family, or if you're in an apartment complex and they're a commercial entity with, lawyers and stuff. But I could see it being that kind of backfires if you're looking at a situation where, an 80-year-old woman is a landlord and has people living in the house and has to comply with all these burdensome regulations, landlord tenant laws. And I think that's just sort of how our housing system has been structured. It's not really set up around shared housing in terms of like our state laws and stuff. There are carve outs in certain areas for like, if you it's owner occupied as a landlord. But I think there are still some complexities, and I don't know, maybe some sort of like legal help for people who are. There is, I mean, landlord tenant law still applies even when you're home sharing, and that's just one of the complexities of living with a stranger.
I have a question about another option. Is another potential solution? So home sharing might feel too much for some folks. But also not wanting to keep the investment for their family or wanting to continue living in the home that they've been in. But if they, have a large 5-bedroom home and they use one portion of it, is there the possibility of like being able to split the home into like one part of the home and then turn a part of the home into an ADU so that there's potential income flow, which might help pay for the maintenance of the house. It now becomes one home becomes a home for 2 people. Somebody didn't have to leave their home, but it allows for has that come up at all?
I have not heard of that before.
I mean, I just think
heard
that
of it.
a lot of the kind of larger, older homes that I've been in are kind of a perfect setup to be able to, they either have a separate entrance or they could have a separate entrance instead.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I remember it coming up in some conversations and some community engagement, but I think the city and the state has certainly tried to reduce barriers for creating ADUs. And I don't know how, like the question would be like, how do we incentivize it more for older adults? And there's decisions and complexities around that, there's a kind of a path that I don't think is as clear.
That's an interesting question.
Or education that it's a possibility, or it could be a possibility.
You probably have some opinions on this too, but if I were to speculate, and actually I live in a house like that. I live with 2 older adults that have sectioned off part of their house, and we live quite harmoniously, and they like having a carpenter in their house. I would imagine that the process is prohibitively difficult and expensive, particularly if we're already talking about somebody with strapped resources.
And so that's something that can be helped at the city level somehow.
I mean, ADUs in general, I think probably help with this. I was thinking of from the other direction because I know several friends that want to build an ADU on their property for their parents.
So you're essentially, the reason I was thinking of an existing home is because you look at the cost of an ADU.
Mhm.
I mean, 800 square foot ADU and you're paying $500,000 for it. So that's why I was thinking, like, could you have to?
And I think it is possible, and there are fewer regulations in the city, as we've seen even in this body, has done an immense amount to promote ADUs. I guess I'm just saying it's still pretty expensive avenue. It's not very simple, especially with depending on the plumbing situation or the electrical situation, to simply like throw a door up midway and then have a livable unit on the other side of the house, depending on how it's already been set up, compared to just having roommates that you coexist with.
I mean, yeah, so it gets into zoning issues.
Yeah.
I mean, you're turning a single family home into a duplex or, multifamily.
And we're definitely taking steps as a city to make that more possible. I'm just citing that as like potential barriers. And it's already very difficult. Even so, I have a client right now who's a 35-year-old, very wealthy doctor, and he's struggling trying to get a small addition on his house in Boulder. So somebody that's limited on resources and perhaps even time might not want to go through several years to modify their house to get it. And I'm not saying it's not also a good idea. I'm just citing these as like other sides of the coin. Because like I said, I live in a house like that now, but that my landlords perhaps had the foresight in their late 50s and early 60s to have the house split down the middle and turned into a duplex. And we have a shared door in the middle. And now that they're in their late 70s, they can live quite comfortably on one half of the house. And we actually do help them with chores all the time. Like I said, we exist quite harmoniously, and that's the closest thing around control I'm ever going to get. So it can be done, but I would imagine that they spent in the orders of magnitude of several $100,000 to make it happen. I'm not sure that they're not getting a return on it, except maybe when they sell the house, which would be when they die at this rate.
And it'd be interesting to see about the resale value for a house that is split in two in a way, don't you think?
Yeah, and once again, you might have opinions on this. My guess is by square footage, it wouldn't be much larger.
I see.
That's my understanding.
This was all permitted and stuff, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But I mean, sometimes you'll hear like Peter Weber or Bill Holicky or Jeremy talk about the ways that, and I'm not a realtor, I'm a builder. So realtors are really good at answering these questions, not me. But my understanding is that because you've essentially just made two smaller houses with the square footage, the price per square foot is relatively similar. It might go up like a little bit, but not in such a measurable way where you're getting that massive investment all the way back, which is why it doesn't happen as much, because there's not a huge ROI on it.
That's what I was, yeah, makes sense.
Well, this is very educational. I don't know if I have any ideas right now on how to like improve the state of affairs for housing for seniors or older adults in our community. Though,
Did you have any asks for HAB?
No.
with that
I
being
probably
said, this
should
is
have.
like, at least in my 2 years, this is the first time we've ever even broached this topic. So I think I was probably the one who said we should get someone in here to talk about it, because I think it's just something, it often takes multiple rounds at one thing before we have an idea. And this is an important demographic in our community, so I think we just need to engage more with it and understand more, maybe come up with an idea down the road. We encourage you to come to us with ideas as well.
It seems like something that we've already kind of touched on is maybe 2-top condos instead of 2-story condos. Like, as in there's a ground floor level and an
Yeah,
upstairs
I mean,
level.
that makes sense. I don't know how popular, like in terms of consumer habits, do people want, I have a 1-floor condo unit. I'm fine with that. Do people like want the 2 floors? Is that more desirable?
Well, it seems like it was at one point.
It
I
definitely
think people
was.
prefer sharing walls than sharing ceilings.
Yes, that's very true.
People,
Yeah, I think
That's-
I mean, I have someone who lives on top of me and sometimes you hear a little noise, and I think that's probably a thing.
Yeah.
So maybe there's
but it's
that.
like if you want to adjust to an aging population, you can say this is the trade-off.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that there's also like with technology, there's a way to make floors a little more soundproof.
It sort of depends on, how you want to do it and the amount of money you want to do it, but I know someone who, before he passed, lived in Los Angeles in a multi-story sort of, I guess most places, it was similar to New York where it looked kind of like apartments, but you owned them. And they were soundproofed. They were, you would not know someone lived above you. So I know it's possible.
Yeah,
It just,
I would say the advance of technology. I lived in a new building in Denver like 6 years ago briefly. And they had the brilliant idea to include Bluetooth sound systems in the ceiling of every unit. The effect of that is that when the person underneath you decided to use their Bluetooth sound unit, your entire floor vibrated. So, just because there's new technology doesn't mean it's always going to be used wisely.
yes, there's that.
I have one more comment, and that is, I have often despaired at how much we stratify people by various demographics. And like if you think about how a lot of subdivisions in suburbia are built, an income difference of 10 or 15% depends on whether you live in this neighborhood or the next neighborhood over. And there's just a lot of homogenization that happens when you build housing that way. And I don't have any problem with Fraser Meadows or Presbyterian manner, and I'm sure that a lot of people really benefit from living in older people. I forgot how to say it correctly.
It's okay.
Housing. My goal, my hope is we have more diversity of people living together. What's one of the things I love about sharing housing concept, but also just more as a community value. I don't want to see people stratified in a way where they can't interact with, or it's difficult to interact with people of
There's lots
different
of
ages or.
Interesting examples. A lot of them come out of Texas, which is interesting, of intergenerational co-housing that is designed for aging in community, aging in place. The whole design is around being able to stay there throughout a lifespan. And there's lots of other examples where intergenerational communities are beneficial. People can help each other do different things. They offer to do different things. I don't want to be stereotypical, but maybe there's like, I can help you out here. Can you help me? It's kind of like home share, but more of a community where people they know what they're getting into. They know there's going to be sort of a cultural expectation that by living in this community that is intergenerational, we're going to be helping each other out, but there's incentives to move there. And so other communities have looked at things like that. There's a lot of advantages.
It seems to me like there's
intergenerational.
consumer demand for older people to live in like exclusive communities. Like you look at the Villages in Florida, which like advertises on TV. I don't know if you've heard of the Villages, but it's like hundreds of thousands of people and you have to be like 65 plus to live there. I mean, it's a sprawling city and people self-select, they want to live there. And I get why. It's like, they put on all the activities and it's affordable and you can get rid of your crappy house in New York and get something nice and cool in Florida. But I mean, that's just like consumer trends. I think Boulder, we do have a pretty good mix of like neighborhoods. If you compare with like some of our neighbors or neighboring towns that are like kind of cookie cutter, same demographic across the board.
Well, it's like I said before, they're just, older adults are just people. Some people want to live with just them. Other people don't.
And my philosophy is if you're 70, 80, you can do what you want. As you've lived that long, that's your privilege.
Can I just add one observation about this? In HHS, we often say when we're talking about housing, we advocate for a diversity of housing type at different price points. I know that the exact language may be changed and how that's looking forward, but the idea is we're advocating for diversity of different housing types. And I think that goal and how we're looking at housing in the community hits on a lot of the comments here.
Yeah, I think that naturally attracts a diversity of
People, a diversity of desires for
Yeah,
types of.
just that.
Yeah.
And condos do that kind of more so than single family homes.
And
There could be
we
empty
just have a
nesters that could
shortage
be-
of that in Boulder.
because of state law that makes it so hard to build condos, so expensive to build condos. I don't know that there's anything the city of Boulder can do to change that.
Yeah, and we've talked about this time and time again. I think probably the solution to that is avoid like the HOA condo and build townhouses with shared wall agreements. And that sort of does, I think that complies with consumer demand. That's what people want. And it also gets a workaround on the concerns people have about construction defect litigation.
But the state just reformed the construction defect laws this year or
It's-
last year.
I think it's still reforming, but there's definitely
It didn't make it any better though. It changed it, but it didn't actually make it cheaper to build condos.
I feel like it's a trend. There's aversion to like buying into an HOA. Like some people just don't love that idea. They want something that
I think the problem is actually this construction defects thing, which makes it completely.
And what you're talking about with the shared wall agreements, it's hard to do that as flats, right? If we're saying
that's correct.
aging population,
Yeah.
their ideal scenario is a flat,
No, you
it's
can't.
hard to do it
You
that
can't
way.
do it.
It's more like a townhome.
Unless they're all just like single family. Um,
I'm super excited that you're putting out an RFP for this sharing thing. That seems like a step that can be taken relatively immediately to offer another type.
An effective and quick way to provide more homes for more people without building doors.
You should quote that. That was good.
I can't quote myself.
Somebody should write that down. Without building doors.
Yeah, we'll let you know how it goes. We're still in the process of figuring all the details out. But
Does anybody have any other questions for these guys? About this?
no, thank you for your time and for the information.
Thank you for being interested in housing and older adults. It's an interesting space. Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right.
Where did you get that Coke?
I brought it from home or from the office.
This is like, is there a machine?
No, I'll survive.
Another flaw. Okay, next up.
I'm just so traumatized from the planning board meeting. I'm like, now it's time to retest.
Have chair and vice chair elections. I don't know if you guys saw it in my email. I was just saying that Lauren and I, we are interested in continuing for a year. And then it's definitely time to turn over. But we do feel like we're kind of getting our groove. So we'd be interested in continuing in our current positions, but.
I support that.
Okay.
I think, well, you guys, you haven't been in a full year, correct? You picked up like half a year ago, maybe, when Karen resigned.
I don't even know how long I've been here, so I don't. Maybe.
I think that's, yeah, because
No,
it was
really,
Karen and then it was
can't
you, that
remember
was
how long
like
it
in
Is that true,
September,
Tiffany?
October.
Okay,
Probably about 7, 8 months, like not even a year yet.
So, I mean, you haven't even served a full year, and I think so far you've both done an excellent job. It sounds like you're interested. I guess we're relying on you to say that Lauren wants to keep doing it.
well, she did.
Okay, she's not here, so I don't want to force her.
As far as you know.
She's been trying to get out of it, and then we make her do it
She
again.
could have made noise.
But
Yeah.
Yes. But I did want to ask, did you, because I wanted to make sure, did you or Jay, Tiffany, did anybody hear from anybody else saying? anything else?
Well, I will nominate Karen Hoskin for chair and Lauren Shevitz for vice chair.
Second.
Okay,
Right.
so we just do like a
There's
second.
4 people here, so 3 votes
All in
gets it
favor?
done.
No, I think 4 votes.
Oh,
It
hi,
still
Shira.
requires 4 votes.
Does it?
Is there any other
Does
nominations?
it necessarily require a majority of the quorum
No, it's a majority of the HAB.
to move anything forward, or a majority of attending
I
members?
don't know if that's true. We
I don't
need
know if
4
that's
members to make a recommendation to council.
Tiffany can tell us for sure.
In order to vote, you have to have a quorum, so that's 4 members and. Right,
Oh, and 5, Shira.
and Sharon.
I think we need a majority of people present.
Oh, Sharon here.
Yeah, she's online.
Hi, I came late. That's on me.
Should you just make her the big floating head?
Let's let her answer the question real quick.
Good.
So as long as you have a quorum and the majority of the quorum passes,
Oh,
then
interesting.
it passes.
Okay,
Unless it's a recommendation to council, then
Correct.
we need a majority of the board.
all in favor?
Or are there any other nominations, I guess?
Oh, yeah.
You're running, so your bias.
Any other nominations? Okay, so do you
Okay.
want to just repeat that really
Yeah,
quickly?
so let's vote on does everyone want to vote on Karen Hoskin to be our board chair?
I think we do
All in
have to do a
favor, say
second.
yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Any opposed?
okay.
Okay,
And then Lauren Shevitz for vice chair.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
cool.
okay. Decision made, excellent. also, please let us know if there's anything you would like us to be doing differently or better or whatever. Feedback, definitely welcome. Okay, the August tab meeting. Tiffany's gonna be gone and we all know she's irreplaceable. So, so I guess the thing is making a motion to cancel the August meeting.
And we don't have one in July.
We do have one in
Oh, we do
July.
have one in July.
It is not uncommon that the November and December meetings get combined and that the time is scheduled to sometime in between there, and it is not uncommon that there is a summer meeting that is canceled.
I'm in favor of it.
The big reason is truly Tiffany's not gonna be here, and it is truly difficult to get somebody to be in that position, and we need that person there, so. So
I
yeah,
think my only pushback is like, I know one of our meetings was like the retreat. We usually do like some sort of diversity training in lieu of a meeting. So I think we just need to keep mindful of like, how many substantive meetings are we having per year? And stay on top of that.
I think that's a fair consideration.
And as a non-voting member, I would actually agree.
Mhm.
As much as I'm like wondering why I'm saying this, but it's like, you know, the way I see it is at most there's already only like what 10 of these. When you have one for this, one for that, like it starts to limit the efficacy of a quarterly report. I find them quite educational, and it's the only time I eat all week. So,
Well, you're gonna have to feed yourself in August,
oh yeah, because it's virtual.
because August we would cancel. That's what I'm, that's.
Oh, well, I mean, I was making a joke about it, about the food, but in all seriousness, I agree with Chip. Like, we're able to move through more, and even if there was some other level of moderated meeting where people were brainstorming, I feel like there was, the last retreat was very heated and it was difficult to get like much in the way of recommendations done or plans. And I do value time for a discussion like that. Just my
Well,
two
the
cents.
purpose of the retreat wasn't to come up with, but like, that's to the point, is like, I'm not saying we have to meet in August, but like, the next time something comes up where it's like, all right, we're not having a meeting this month because we're doing this instead. I think we just need to make sure we're having regular meetings where we can debate policy and have the public involved.
Do we have something that we would be doing in August if we did have a meeting that's just now being slid back, or is it still
I
open?
didn't have anything calendared.
Because there's also, I don't know who read this email, but we have been invited by Michael Block to the All Roads Shelter to host a meeting there. And I don't know if doing a tour, maybe like a light meeting instead of like the full, like maybe it would be easier to find a staff member that was interested in participating in that.
Can we, maybe as a compromise, if we cancel our official meeting, can we do a tour of all roads in August?
Well, we could do that as the official meeting is what I'm suggesting, because that's still several months away and Michael was quite eager to have us as guests.
Holly, Tiffany, chime in. Philip, your experience, I do believe that when we've done a tour of a place in the past,
They open to the public? I can't remember.
Yeah, they're noticed
I
and.
mean, they're
and
noticed.
open, so if anybody wants to show up. Yeah, it's not
Obviously-
the Jay about taking
It obviously depends. on
minutes.
all
Hold on,
the-
hold on a second, what?
I can talk to Jay and or Holly, whoever would be attending that meeting about like doing the record keeping. If you're just doing a tour, it just still has to have like minutes and things like that posted. But yes, it would still have to be noticed for public because it's board business.
Right.
So you'd be open for.
I think it'd be dependent on their schedule.
Virtual.
We wouldn't have to like impose on them necessarily that it has to be Wednesday at 6 p.m. Like what works best for them, you know?
Oh, right, yes, you can change the time and.
Okay,
and
so we'll table that.
But we've got 2 months to sort it out. So it's like if we slide Michael a note.
Or somebody else. We have some other stuff potentially slated, tours and things like that too, so. Okay, Quarterly update to council. If you guys remember, we created a quarterly update to go to council, and I know what you're gonna say.
I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay.
I've said my piece on this one.
I just wanted to say, I
My
know
question,
what
have
you
you
wanna
made
say.
it?
No.
Okay.
So, and a part of that was like circumstances with the death of my family,
Okay.
et cetera, et cetera. So I was on the list, I can't remember now, if it was 2 or 3 times, it was a few times, didn't get chosen. And no, I didn't show up and take the floor. I was just in the public participant section. But so I went back and just looked at the quarterly update that we had all approved of what I would say. And it's like kind of relevant, still kind of not. So it seemed worth it to me to just talk with you guys and say, is that still what we want to do, or do we want to create a new statement? And yeah, kind of part 2 of that was the discussion around, okay, so if we don't, whoever it is that is trying to get in front of council during public participation, and sometimes it's taken somebody a couple of times, sometimes it was the first time, but if it doesn't go right away, just basically sending the verbiage to council so that the message is still delivered. So I guess I have 2 questions there for discussion. 1, shall we revisit that before I or somebody else gets back on the list again? And part 2 was, does that seem like a solid method if somebody doesn't get chosen, whether it's 1 or 2 times, that it gets shared to council that way? Thoughts? Thinking?
I don't know what it says.
Oh,
We
to tell you?
approve it.
I'll tell you, because I can tell you in 2 minutes or less.
Yeah, at least 2 of us weren't here.
Okay,
when
so
that
no,
was put
really, I
together.
will, I
Well, your
will.
first question's about process and the second's about substance.
Yes.
So
Yes, the other way around, but yeah, for sure.
and I've obviously chimed in on this many times before.
Chalk it in front of Penfield Tate. Send a message.
The charter says we have a right to.
It's like
I
chalk it on the sidewalk.
I've never heard you say that before.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense to like email it to all the council members, obviously, if we can't get in there and talk to them. You know, I think originally when I proposed this quarterly update, it came from a sense that we weren't making recommendations to council. Since then, we have made some, and I think we've gotten some points across.
Also, for what it's worth, I think you might have missed this conversation, but during the BBCP update, we brought the letter before the floor and adjusted a policy to more closely align to the recommendation.
Oh, thank you. I had that in my notes to bring that up later,
Yeah.
but perfect, thank you.
And we talked about this as well at our retreat, which is like, we're gonna do a brainstorming session. I mean, I think originally I just wanted our board to be a little more like disciplined about having to make recommendations to council. And because I felt like my first year on the board, we didn't do that. But I think since then, we have done a few.
I would also just comment that we had an avalanche of recommendations right before you joined.
I'm aware, I know the whole airport thing happened right before.
No,
I
it was
joined.
not the airport, there was just like occupancy stuff, ADU stuff, so on. So anyways, I can see how that it felt like we weren't doing enough, like that's when you showed up, because I felt like a lot's happened in recent years.
Lots also changed within the city in recent years in terms of housing, like the philosophy has shifted pretty dramatically.
What do you need from us again? What's the first question?
So the first question is, when I or somebody else goes to say this, are we going to say the same thing? Do we need to revise it? Because we had to collectively agree on what was being said. So that's the first question.
And this has never been emailed, or I know you didn't get called on, but it was never emailed either.
That is true,
Okay.
because
So
we
it's-
hadn't made that.
So it's all information that they haven't seen before.
Exactly. But perhaps they're watching. So
So
I'm going to say it right now. Are you ready?
I know exactly what they're doing right now because I'm getting phone calls from all of them.
This will be helpful to you too.
Yeah,
so you can-
we-
I mean, it really,
They don't
it really-
realize I'm gonna have me.
it really will just take a couple of minutes. Hello,
Everybody's
my name is
quite
Lauren
off around
Austin.
town.
I'm the chair of the Housing Advisory Board. I'm here tonight representing HAB. First, we want to thank you for considering the points made in our annual letter as you headed into your retreat. HAB does not envy you receiving so many suggestions from the city's many boards and commissions and having to narrow it down to 6 priorities for 2026. In our letter, we recommended that during the major update to the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, a housing forward approach be taken. This would include things like increasing a variety of housing types, encouraging mixed use development near transit corridors, and moving the Area 3 Planning Reserve into Area 2 as the next step in making it available for annexation. We recommended that you continue to explore ideas generated from the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. It was exciting to hear about home sharing initiatives and potential different uses of city-supported spaces. We recommend that you prioritize the implementation of family-friendly, vibrant neighborhoods initiative in regards to diversity, affordability, walkability, and livability. We are pleased to see that one of your 6 priorities for the 2026 includes consideration of the changes to Title IX, the city's land use code. We hope that a streamlined code can improve permitting efficiencies, clarify housing options, and better align development with Boulder's housing goals. Finally, this quarter, HAB explored housing models serving neurodivergent residents by engaging with developers, designers, and advocates across Colorado to better understand opportunities and barriers. Looking ahead, we are eager to examine how updates to the comp plan and Title IX may help encourage housing solutions for special populations of our community. Thank you for your service to the city and for your attention tonight.
Is the comp plan stuff still relevant, or, I mean, that's moved along since we wrote
Yeah.
that?
And
That's what we've been kind of discussing. It's this council session is tomorrow, but there's quite a bit of controversy over planning board's recommendations, so it might get kicked back.
And can you just say again, because I appreciate hearing that planning marathon meeting the other night.
We went till 1:30 in the morning.
I've been getting a lot of those emails. Sounds like some bad an airport.
We talked about the airport for 10 minutes. Honestly, we weren't there all night for the airport. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that at that meeting, it came up, the HAB recommendation that we made about
Yeah.
Boulder Valley Comp Plan. So
And me and Mason specifically brought it.
So we made an impact.
And a very measurable one and a large policy. And then we also made it conditional on approval, which means that council cannot approve that plan without agreeing to that change in line with HAB's recommendation. That being said, the only other condition of approval is language around the airport, which has become deeply, deeply politicized. There are some other 30 recommendations. I think that in our recommendation to council, we should say that Mr. Lord's recommendations to the BVCP are incredibly insightful and relevant. You should put that in because
It's on the record.
I'm waiting. I think a bigger fight than the airport is gonna be when we go to build low-income housing, the planning reserve right next to the gun range. I could see that blown up into something.
No pun intended.
That was no pun was intended, by the way.
But
No, when I said that, I meant it could be controversial.
all jokes aside, and I mean, this is just my 2 cents because I'm once again not a voting member, but that was a good spiel. But I agree that a percentage of it has faded out of relevance.
Mhm.
And it might dilute the messaging about Title IX that is at the forefront of the current political discourse.
And it might be nice to have the stuff on Title IX grounded in specific recommendations. Like, here's an example of something that's really messing with.
I think ideally, I like this idea of going to council chambers to articulate what we've agreed on. Even if we're emailing it to them, again, they get a lot of paper. I think getting our point across is very helpful. And originally the quarterly statement was like, I feel like it was intended to like keep us disciplined. I almost feel like from now on, like, I don't know, like when we come up with a recommendation, we vote on it and approve it. In addition to the normal channels where we email it, someone should go and read it to council. I think that's like very valuable.
And part of the value of that is that then the discipline to make a new one
Right.
instead of rehashing one from last time.
You can also bring notes to, you can be like, we'd like to distribute to this. Not all the counselors read the same amount of their emails.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's helpful, maybe something in lieu is have someone read the last recommendation we passed on the comp plan. Although it sounds like that's already been kind of factored in. But I think every time we vote to increase housing supply, it doesn't hurt to stand in there and tell it at the people.
I just
Well,
did.
you could say thank you for, you know,
Incorporating our recommendation.
incorporating our recommendation.
That was planning board that did that.
Thank you.
Well, actually, staff did it and planning board approved it. And then planning board modified it to give it a bit more teeth. There was some language about full spectrum. I don't think you missed this too. There was some language about full spectrum of housing that we felt left too much open end to be like, I have a 7,000 square foot home. That's in the spectrum, which is not necessarily
So maybe
the point we were trying to go
We
for.
discussed this at a retreat, but I would like to see sort of like how in the past year or so we've
Oh,
dedicated.
you're skipping so far ahead of me. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
We've dedicated a period of our meetings to discussing the quarterly update. We sort of talked about maybe we transition that to discussing our next recommendation, brainstorming our next recommendation. And then once we make a recommendation, we vote on it, it gets emailed in paper. I like that. And someone goes to council chambers and reads it, you know, hear ye, recommendation of the board. I think that's probably it's like the next step for us, maybe.
Okay, so my two questions were, do we need to revise what we're gonna say? Which, what I hear is yes. Potentially with some specifics on Title IX and acknowledging staff and planning board for hearing our BBCP update recommendations.
I mean, I think your time is pretty precious. I don't mind personally passing that along to the planning board. You know, if you're worried about the confines of an email, I guess pleasantries are always nice, but
It's also not our job to advise the planning board. You can liaise. I think that's the purpose of having a planning board seat. But our mandate is to advise council and the city manager.
yeah, I guess I'm saying like in regards to the BVCP,
Yeah.
we're the ones that did take the advice
Yeah.
and hear it. And in some ways to give a layout to council.
Right. So maybe we should read that to council. The recommendation we passed. It sounds like it's already on its path to be incorporated in, but I think it just impresses upon council that this is coming from the Housing Advisory Board, that we unanimously agree the housing supply should be increased.
Okay, let me take a whack at a revision and I'll share it out.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, and then part two of that, or my second question was, that it seems like try and get in front of council if we can't, distributing it.
Yeah, I think anytime there's a already when there's a recommendation, we distribute it, but I think if we can get it in person as well, then that's helpful.
Okay, so now, so kind of an okay segue. Well, I mean, it is, it's just a little messy. So recap of team building exercises. So the kind of the number one thing that I took away from our team building time was just being really more, and I think what you were just saying, Chip, it's like being more intentional about our specifics to council. And so tonight we had an informational session about older adult services, what's available in the city, what's in the pipeline, maybe some ideas about what to come. So then kind of summing that up at the end of every meeting saying, okay, so is there an action item related to that? Doesn't always have to be an action. I don't think we should make there be an action item if there isn't one. But if there is one, what is it? Is it learning more, making a specific recommendation, or just great, that was good information to have. We haven't had anything specific ever, or maybe in a while, or I don't know. And now we know more.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I did not leave today with like, oh, this is what we need to do as a city. But I think what I did take away from today was that like, this is important and it's something we should pay more attention to because we haven't really paid attention to it in the past. So first of all, I'd love to hear if anyone else has like any ideas on a theoretical recommendation that we could consider, but if not, I would propose as an action item, you know, within 1 year, let's get another update on the progress and development the city has made with respect to housing for older adults. And just, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole meeting, but have someone, sounds like there's something in the pipeline with maybe like, let's get an update on that, you know, a year from now. And it doesn't have to be a whole presentation, but you know, that's what I would propose. But I'd love to hear if anyone else has more like substantive ideas than that.
No, I mean, my first reaction to that is like, that's a very strange action item to say, let's get an update in a year.
Because it's assumed that we would get an update if there's something happening, or why, what do you mean?
It's kind of a non-action item.
Okay.
Well, right, that's why I'm inviting, if you have something better than that, I feel like that's the floor of what we need to do, you know, the minimum.
I mean, there's nothing to say we have to have an action item coming
No.
out of tonight's presentation.
No,
Right.
That,
But I
that
think-
could be an answer too.
yeah, yes, exactly. So I guess.
There's
okay.
no action and
I think
action,
we're
it's kind
gonna-
of a philosophical
I think
question.
we're kind of merging a couple of things, so I'm gonna divide it into two different things again, try and do this. Okay, so coming out of our team building thing, it seems like one thing that we could do, it's like an agenda item on any of the meetings that we have, guests or a panel or some presentation to, at the end of the night, after discussion, say, is there an action item?
Right.
Okay,
Is
does
there?
that seem like a good thing? That's my question.
Is there?
Yes, that was a good
Okay.
process.
So then part two of that is, do we have anything coming out of the presentation tonight? And it sounds like there isn't a true action item. True?
That's right. I said my piece, but I don't want us to just say we don't care about this issue. We never want to hear about it again.
No.
Like that's,
Yeah.
like, let's keep this on the agenda. That's what I'm saying.
Holly, will you update us? I would love to hear, especially about like, after the RFP has gone out and a decision, I would like to hear something about the house sharing thing when that happens.
Great, when it's up and running.
Yeah.
Some information about who's
Cool.
participating and how
Awesome.
it's going. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Don't threaten me with a good time, you guys.
You said March 17th of 2022. I just.
What's last in a
You did-
year?
You
Come
did
back.
say that the RFP is gonna be in 2027 sometime, right?
I'm hoping it's in 2026, but I'm sometimes
Okay.
overwhelmed.
There was there was a update to the 4-year plan that's coming in February 27th, which might be the date. you
Maybe
were
that was what I
thinking.
was hearing. Okay.
So I think a year from now is a good target to get an update.
You just let us know.
No, and if in theory, I don't expect the city said, hey, we've done nothing since last time we talked, then that might be room for us to be concerned, you know, that's why I don't expect that.
Was there anything else that anybody wanted to comment on that came out of the team building that
Well, I think part of
you were thinking?
what we suggested is just like a brief, and it seems like we have time tonight, but like, does anyone have just generally recommendations? Like, we're not gonna debate and vote on a recommendation right now, but just like ideas that they're thinking through that they might want to propose down the road. Like, I think keeping that conversation going so we know where other people's minds are at and we can kind of build coalitions around an idea and eventually like tee it up for a vote. I think that's productive. And I thought that was something we discussed at our retreat.
Do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, so here's an example. I've discussed this with you, but an idea I've had, and I haven't like landed on what this recommendation would be. But like, to the extent we've learned about how the city handles housing for homeless people experiencing homelessness or houselessness or whatever, is like, we have All Roads, we have the homeless shelter, and that's where like people who are living on the streets go. And then we have like BHP and permanently supportive housing. I don't think people just go from the streets to All Roads into BHP. Like there's kind of a missing step in that process. And we have heard from Bridge House about the work they've done in the city, where it's like sort of transitional housing, like it's, you stay there, but it's more dormitory. It's not permanent, but it's more permanent than a homeless shelter. And on top of that, they connect them with employment, the residents with employment. And like, that's the idea where it's like, probably to be sustainable in BHP, you probably need some sort of job. So it's like, that is the transitional middle ground between All Roads Homeless Shelter and subsidized housing, is like this middle transitional housing. And I've seen our city's budget on what we spend on homelessness, and that is a sliver. I think it's less than 1%. It's less than half. It's tiny. I think it's $75,000 a year is what the city of Boulder spends on transitional housing. And I want to learn more about how can we more effectively allocate money for homelessness services to transitional housing. What services are available, what service providers are available, what are the needs of the current infrastructure, all of that. And perhaps I'm not ready, but like, I'd like to learn more to put us in a position to make a recommendation on transitional housing for homelessness.
Can I, so I have to say something, I should have mentioned it earlier. So apologies, but there is a note that I have here from Jay that says homelessness services is outside of the purview of HAB. And so there's a services. So there's a distinction, a line that has to be identified and.
We've dealt with this before, but it's, if it's housing, it's putting a roof over someone's head. I think that's housing.
So, okay, so that's an example
That's an
of a path of a
example
recommendation.
of a recommendation sort of that I've been contemplating.
I think I like the idea of transitional housing, which is objectively a type of housing. And I think that is measurably in lack. And I mean, even Bridge House, there's a step between severe addiction, et cetera, and Bridge House that doesn't exist, which is very difficult because they can't necessarily just take anybody.
Okay, I'm gonna try and rein this in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not here to debate it, but this was an example of like how I kind of want this conversation. Now I'd like to hear about the airport or something, like no pressure, Phil, but like what recommendations are people thinking through in their mind and like get it out there. We're not here to vote or debate, but maybe this is like a conversation we pick up next month, you know, and people think about it and share their ideas more.
In terms of the process, from my My experience with HAB, you bring someone in, they give a presentation, that is the discussion, and then the reaction, the response from HAB happens. So it's not just like chatting, it's a reaction to a presentation or data. Just throwing that out as like a process in terms to get in as a way to get to what you're saying.
Well, it also
I don't
can
know.
lay the seeds for a future meeting on the topic, which is if we're all thinking, hey, we like the idea of making this recommendation, maybe, but we don't know enough about it. We need to learn more, so it's a good
So
recommendation.
different,
Let's bring in this person next
Yeah.
month, like
a different
that's,
action item would be connecting
Yeah.
with Michael Block and doing a tour.
or Bridge House or whatever, yeah.
Was there anything, David, that you,
Yeah, I mean, the thing I brought up at the retreat was I'm really interested because it's the business I'm in, figuring out how development of affordable housing can be streamlined in the city through their processes. And someone mentioned during the retreat that there is a pilot program for expediting, I don't know if it was entitlement or permitting. So I guess the idea I had is to bring in someone that can speak about that pilot program, and then we, as HAB, could give council feedback on, yes, this program's on the right track, or like, this is what this program is missing with, you know, some real world experience. Lauren and Max and, you know, I that do this, like, are they addressing the things that really slow down the development of affordable housing? Or are they, you know, are they right on the right track and it needs to be encouraged?
I think that's a phenomenal idea.
So that could be, you know, a learning session, and then at the end of that learning session, we could turn that into a recommendation of like, right on, let's support this group, or like, yeah, they need to do this and some other things.
great.
So I think that's something that should.
I
Don't forget we have
that
Ms.
as
Feinberg over here too.
Huh?
Oh yeah, she's in the business as well, that's right.
Sure. Oh, sure. Hi. Yeah. Okay, great. I have that on the list of our work plan with your name attached.
So we have to so I can do research on that if you want, figure out who that is at the city and make contact with them if they could come in and give us a presentation about what their
Yeah,
program is all about.
cool.
We've already lined someone up.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so we heard you. And we have someone, sorry.
Okay, great.
Um,
Put a little star by it.
yeah, you can put a star. And I think she can come in July to talk about Prop 123 expedited review. I'm sorry. And other ways that the city's streamlining permitting processes.
And I think part of this process is like, A, it's setting our agenda, but our agenda shouldn't be just like topics. It's like, what are we kind of angling towards in terms of recommendation? And then we refine that as we learn more. So I don't know if you have like a gut instinct on a recommendation without putting pen to paper. I think that's always just a helpful thing to talk about. Anything else, Philip?
Back to you, but hold on. Shira, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting you're there because I can't see you.
All
Did,
good.
was there anything from our team building in May that stood out to you as
Yes. Not so much from the team building, but from a conversation I had today with Jill Grano.
I know, yeah.
Jill Grano.
Thank you. About, yes, definitely we want to have more affordable housing in the city, and focusing on folks at those lowest incomes is really important. But at the moment, most of our rental market, we all know this, is pretty much meeting the need. And we were talking about how awesome it would be if housing is more of a human right that is more regulated versus a wealth building tool and a commodity. And I know that's a huge topic and not something necessarily that Boulder can solve, but deed restricted home ownership is something I'm really interested in, and that can be for middle income, but I think it could also be for maybe a bit lower AMIs as well. It could be for all AMIs. And how can we preserve more land, more homes, more housing as community resources, community needs rather than as assets. And then, yeah, also bringing that like ownership view into it of this is completely in your control. You have the stability. It is still equity building, even if not necessarily wealth building. So I don't know what the recommendation there could be, but just like what can we do to bring more investment and more attention into that space and deed restricted housing. So
Okay.
that's my interest at the moment. And I think I talked a bit at the retreat about my interest in housing as a human right versus as a commodity and wealth building tool in terms of home ownership. So I guess there's a connection there.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And then, I mean, just to mirror what Shira was saying, because I know that there were comments that this might be like more of a federal issue or a state issue, but there are tools even at the residential level, or I'm sorry, the municipal level, like second home taxes that shift people away from parking capital or developing capital with homes. So there's lots of room for discussion there, and things that aren't necessarily happening could happen, might not want to happen, but I think that that's a great idea as well.
Right. And I guess maybe like the flip side of that is like what happens if this doesn't take place does Boulder just become a place where it's just a second home community? And there's just a bunch of empty homes because the only people who can afford to buy anything are people who have the ability to buy, many, many properties. Or is it just a retirement community, right? Because like we were talking about, people with the wealth are generally older. So,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Thanks.
And we've sort of broached this, I think, topic on like vacancy tax, and then one thing I've thrown out there is maybe as an alternative to a vacancy tax is like a homestead exemption, which is like everyone gets taxed, but if you actually live in your house, then you get the tax wiped off or something like that. That's probably more palatable, which is like there's a new tax, but you get a tax break if you're occupying your home. And then, of course, the question is, well, then does that increase rental prices? But you could, I don't know.
I guess my interest is also more in like how the deed restriction component. And yes, like we definitely want to protect against that. And the vacancy tax and those homestead tax are great ideas to prevent the homes that are already out there from sitting empty or being Airbnb'd or whatnot. But yeah, how can we also create deed restricted home ownership opportunities for folks?
Okay. Ella?
I believe you have ideas.
Just one little thing, I'm never about to start talking about the airport. Like, I don't think I've ever talked about the airport, and at least not in recent years. Just for the record, it's not
I
something.
feel like I've just encountered you in
it's
front of a
not something
Safeway or something with a clipboard.
Yeah, it's not something I've ever brought up in this context.
But you can.
But I'm not going to.
Depends on how you interpret the hotlines today.
Shira, thank you for your comments about, thinking about, community-oriented housing or deed restrictions. I love Thistle and the work they're doing with community land trusts, and it's hard for me not to hear your comments without thinking about how BHP does that in a lot of ways for affordable housing. And maybe there's ways to think about how to do some of that for missing middle or something like that. I don't know. I feel like, again, I think the most effective that we can be is anticipating what is on the city council's agenda and being one step ahead so that we always have something ready to push to them to inform their discussions of what they're making decisions on. So that this Title IX stuff is very timely in that respect. So that's kind of my reaction was the same as yours. Like, that's an incredible idea. if we could push on that for a few months, that would be really cool, so.
I think that's very, very wise, yeah.
And then, I mean, this kind of relates to my point on the like transitional housing, but on a broader level, I mentioned this to Karen, is like every summer council starts debating the budget. And that is an area where we absolutely can weigh in. And it doesn't just have to be on transitional housing. Like there's so many issues where the budget affects housing in this city. And to your point, where you're saying like we should be kind of one step, what's on their agenda, when they start looking at the budget, that's the time to make a recommendation on the city should be allocating resources to XYZ. And I think that's 100% within our purview as a board. And that's obviously one of the power of the purse is one of the biggest powers the city has. So I think we should be paying attention to the budget and looking at where does allocating resources comport with sort of the areas of needs we've identified through our work over the past years. And I encourage everyone to think about that.
I think I understand where you're coming from. And I agree that the power of the purse is one of the largest ones, but to Philip's point, kind of reading political tides and like striking effectively is probably good. And there's a lot going on to strategic allocations of funds right now. And I'm not sure that recommendations from HAB about that will be as meaningfully received as kind of flat out recommendations about Title IX.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm opposed to, I know nothing about Title IX, so maybe someone educate me or let's bring in someone to educate me. But I'm not saying we don't do that. I'm just saying that is another area. The budget process comes up every single year and it's, you know, it's reported in the news. It's something people care about. And since I've been on this board, it's not something we've ever weighed in on. But it's certainly within our purview pursuant to the ordinance that created this board. Do you want to summarize?
I feel like it's just one of these things where there's a lot of expertise required to make a meaningful, useful recommendation on the budget. And so, I mean, sure, I'm happy to listen and to learn and to see if something sounds good. I doubt that I'm gonna personally go become a budget expert so that I can help navigate making effective recommendations, but I don't wanna be a wet blanket on someone else. If you're enthusiastic about it, go for it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not always just about dollars, you know. Like, have made a recommendation on the airport before I joined this, and the city has spent a lot of money on that, paying lawyers and turning down funding. So like those are all financial decisions, financial implications. And we do have the power to weigh in on that. So I think that's something we should just think about. What is this Title IX issue? You want to educate me a little bit?
Do you know what Title IX is?
I'm generally familiar with it, but I haven't been paying attention to how this plays in the city.
It's city code. It's the land use code. And
what is the issue? You know,
so basically what Jill would say, probably, Jill, I think, got like a master's in this, is that we are up against basically a century of exclusionary zoning that was designed to keep Boulder small, affluent, and white. And over the years, we've made a lot of amendments to it and a lot of good progress. But there kind of comes a point where we need to ask ourselves, is it easier to untangle a ball of yarn or like throw the ball of yarn out and get a new one? That's a very contentious debate right now. Some people think that we should bring in an outside consulting company to completely rewrite it. Some people think that there are meaningful steps along the way that might make that process easier, even though that might not be as like sexy of a political thing to say, is that we're going to make revisions instead of we're going to overhaul it. But like wide sweeping revisions, because for instance, if we do overhaul the entire thing, there are some safeguards in place that the community would be outraged about, like say height limitations. Like that is in the code, and if we rewrote it, we would need to revisit it, and then the years of public opinion that we need to go into the exact inches of height, like might not be worth it. So that's like a very condensed summary of conflicting opinions on the matter, but it's all of that is in the city council's immediate priorities is to untangle Title IX.
David, did you want to chime in with more about that?
I was talking less about that part and more about like the, the permitting and entitlement streamlining. I mean, it's related, I guess, but
I was suggesting because I think that your recommendation is separate from Title IX. I just didn't know if you had personal experience with Title IX that you might want
not a
to.
whole lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, I realized now I conflated the two things.
I do think Title IX, that's super important. We should be having opinions on that too.
And Title IX is also specifically a city council priority right now. It's in their short list of things that they want to be tackling immediately after, say, the BVCP and some other stuff.
So to your point, like giving them advice on things that we know they want to take action on is probably, the best efficacy of our board.
And I completely agree that I think that was a very salient point by Philip, that like probably one of the best things that we could do is get ahead on Title IX so that as it's coming, I'm sure that some city planners would like to talk about it. I hear about it a little bit because of the.
I'd like to learn more about it. Absolutely.
And it is really complicated boulders. I was actually very much a Title IX revisionist until recently somebody mentioned specifically the height stuff and some of the setback stuff. And they're like, we will spend years dealing with public feedback if we try to mess with the height, or even if we have to reestablish a new one versus just kind of like cutting parts of it out and putting new stuff in.
But maybe it's worth talking about the height restriction to play devil's advocate, because I would love to see that gotten rid of or reformed.
You would not catch me dead saying that in a room in front of a camera.
I mean, we can debate that, but I'm opposed to making modifications to our height restrictions, largely on the grounds of equity, which is that Boulder is a city where you don't need to be super rich to have a view of the mountains. Like you can walk a corner and see it anywhere. And I think that's a defining feature of our community that a lot of people in our community really like. Denver doesn't have height restrictions, and you can't see the mountains in most places in Denver unless you have a really nice view because you're wealthy. So I don't think people want that in this town. That's my gut instinct.
Okay. That's fair. I know a lot of people don't want that, but on a personal perspective, for me, I weigh housing is a human right. That ranks with food, access to water, clean air, and for me, a view of the mountains when you can take a short drive or bus or bike to see all of our protected open space and see the view of the mountains. It's a completely appropriate alternative to being able to see it from any corner, when I think housing is just far outranks that value for me on a personal level.
No, I hear you. It's like everything in life. There's always a balancing act to keeping people happy.
So maybe
I was just going to say, like, we might be getting a bit too deep in the weeds, but it sounds like Title IX interests people. But I will just say really quickly here that there are ways to circumnavigate the height restriction through site review and planning board. And it's one of the tools that we're able to achieve more equitable housing by saying, if you want to build taller, it needs to be more affordable. So there's some other confounding variables too.
And then just the final point of all this, I'm fine with, I feel like there's a reason why there is like a liaison seat on this board for planning, which is there's overlap. But we are not the planning board, we're housing advisory. So while there is that overlap, I think we shouldn't just get solely narrowed in on the planning issues. And just back to my point on the budget, 26, Boulder had a $521 million budget. 53 million was for housing and human services. I think our council could benefit from some informed guidance on budget issues. It's a huge part of what the city does. And I know that's like uncharted waters because we have not done that before, but I think it's just something we should keep an open mind to.
Are there any other topics or specific guests that anybody has in mind for me to add to the list?
I think that Title IX, I just want to second that one is
I hear
super
you.
important, but
Yeah.
if I were to do my like little passion project, like what I'm working really hard on in the city is like mixed industrial housing. And that's kind of my recommendation for the EVCP as well, is like, how are we going to incorporate housing in industrial areas to the point where we have people coexisting happily? Now that can be like a way down the line when we're just like planting a seed where we're not losing like industrial or artist spaces, but we're incorporating lofts, et cetera, because the ROI on creating new industrial is virtually non-existent. And we're at risk of pretty much removing all industrial capacity in town for the sake of residential. And how are we going to find balance between those two things? Because it's not very progressive to send all the welders out of town either. You know, we do need tradespeople in town.
Also, do we have something in the pipeline for permitting and entitlement stuff on the schedule?
Well,
Well,
sounds like
that's
maybe.
July,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's
Yeah, we have
July.
someone from Planning and Development Services.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Lisa.
I'm getting the Title IX and the permitting streamlining.
Yeah,
It's just conflated.
yeah,
We talked about your bridge house on there, Rachel?
I do,
Yep.
yep.
I mean, the other transitional housing provider I can think of is Together. I mean, they do it for a specific age demographic, but you know, 15th and Pine, it's similar thing. Something that goes between the streets and affordable housing.
Yep, I have them on the list along, potentially along with Bridge House.
Okay.
Mhm.
We had all of them on a panel a year or 2 years ago, I guess.
It might have been a little bit longer ago.
3 years ago.
And my thought on that is like, next time we go into this similar panel, let's be a little more like locked in on like, all right, what action are we gonna take, you know? And that's the point of this conversation. I agree with everything that I'm interested in everything I've heard tonight, with the exception of getting rid of the height restrictions. Sorry, Shira, but we're allowed to disagree. That's okay.
I love a hot take.
I'll allow one disagreement. for
that's
now.
it. That's all you get.
I love a hot take.
I love a hot take too. I'm like, I'm already dreaming of my master plan to rally support against the height restrictions.
Excellent.
Free to recruit me.
Okay,
Yay.
any other things for the HAB work plan? Okay. All right. Matters from the staff.
I have no matters.
What do you mean?
Really? Am I supposed to?
Well,
Jay usually has something to
I
say.
have nothing to say.
are you
You
next?
guys did great.
He's usually not that complimentary.
If we made a recommendation on the height restriction, that'd be so funny. That's a good way to make the paper. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe like anarcho-communists of the HAB are trying.
We get a lot more public comment on our next meeting.
Yeah.
There have not been any official updates yet as far as how boards are going to be kind of transitioning to align a little bit more with the way city council runs meetings. Nothing official yet, but we will be moving towards the way that city council records notes and things, less the way we do it, which is I don't remember the term for it, but basically writing down everything, which is the way notes are taken for HAB and a couple other boards. The way city council does it, and the way that the city's moving towards for everybody is going to be just what has decisions for the night. So anything that's been voted on or decided to push forward, there won't be like the detailed notes. That is to assist with streamlining as well as making sure that things are accurate. Keeps
I think that makes sense, especially in light of everything's recorded now.
right. So that'll be a change that will be coming about by the end of the year, and they just kind of told us to let boards know, but there hasn't been any official.
Well, your minutes have been great.
Thanks. But they'll be a lot more streamlined, kind of the way that
They'll still
city
be-
council does it. It's just what was approved, what was not,
Okay.
and then everything else will be available via recordings.
Okay.
The only update that we've gotten so far for boards.
Okay. Final thoughts, suggestions, anybody have anything else they want? I have something. Biz West hosted a middle income housing summit last week. There was, should have paid attention, maybe 50 to 75 people present. And one thing I would say that was really great is that there was 7 different mayors there from the surrounding towns, and some other housing and human services or planning or whatever, that like there was just a fair amount of local government from surrounding areas present there. And it was really great so there was a panel discussion and then some prompts, and they broke everybody up into groups, and they tried to have, you were assigned to a table, so they tried to have some different perspectives at each table. And it was pretty cool to hear what some of the other cities are doing. We should be doing some things different, but
Like what?
we're also doing some really great stuff. The pre-apps, some cities do pre-app stuff like that, talk about streamlining
What's pre-app?
stuff. Well, you construction people can probably explain that better than.
I mean, Boulder does pre-apps.
Okay, so what is it that they do different? Let me think about this, because I was just learning about this. Is it the process of how they do it
You want to explain what pre-app is?
that's different?
Well, I don't know what other municipalities you're talking about, but I mean, a pre-app meeting is where you sit down at the very onset of a development or design project and get feedback from the city. And Boulder does that, and Denver does that. It's a pretty common thing.
Is it
But
that it was early, they do it earlier potentially?
Are you talking about like pre-approved structures or?
oh, that's not what I was talking about.
Well, I'm wondering if
I was
that's
talking
what
about
she's,
for pre-application.
yeah, I'm wondering if that's what you're
They
thinking
were talking
about. 'Cause I know
They were
that there's
talking about
some-
the process.
Cause there's some municipalities that it's like, if you build this exact thing, we'll just tell you it's okay.
That also came up as well. And we apparently the city of Boulder does have some things like that, but that doesn't necessarily make the process faster, even though that was the goal. So that came up as well. Trying to think of other things.
Question,
Yeah.
was it, maybe it was during our retreat that someone made a comment like, is the manufactured housing like delayed or something like that, or maybe it wasn't our retreat, I feel like I heard that, or is that moving along? I know the modular home factory,
It's up and running.
yeah,
Maybe what you were thinking of is that there's like 4 boxes that are done and complete and wrapped and sitting at the factory, but they can't quite go to Ponderosa yet because why? You're nodding your head. Do you know why?
Because of some city process, I think, unfortunately.
Was it city or is it Excel with the?
I don't.
I know
There's a
there's
lot
lots
of
of
stuff
things,
going
there's so
on.
many steps, so many things.
Um,
It's a mess.
So maybe that's.
It would be nice if that would be streamlined as
Jay
well.
definitely knows the answer to
Yeah,
this
he
question.
seems very educated on that. I think that's something we should look at. I mean, one concern I've had with, and we've talked about this with Ponderosa, is this whole project has made it not a mobile home park. And that is, the mobile home parks are desirable in that they're very affordable because the resident only needs to pay for a lot space. They don't need to, like, they could also rent the unit, but the mobile homes are much cheaper than like a house. And I think we should just be paying attention as we kind of explore that area. Like Ponderosa is not a mobile park anymore. I think it was. It's now just.
It's phasing out.
You're turning a mobile home park into manufactured housing.
That is true.
And like, what does that mean? Like is that necessarily a model for all the other mobile home parks in Boulder? What impact does that have on residents? Like, that's something we should be paying attention to, because you made a comment about you'd like to see a mobile home park in the planning preserve.
I did.
And I think
I would
that's,
like to too.
And I
think that's a
think-
great idea.
and I think that's something very interesting we should look at, but we need to recognize a mobile home park is different from a modular housing community. And it's structured differently. And having done some eviction work with mobile homes, a critique I sometimes observed with the mobile home parks is some of them are run by like big for-profit corporations that make it very difficult to live in for the residents. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, would BHP ever get involved with running a mobile home park?
Well,
One in El Dorado is resident owned, and the one in Moab just bought theirs for the sake of protecting them towards posterity, which is an interesting maneuver.
Sharon
And
has.
Thistle actually is the resident-owned community's like technical assistance provider. There's like a national coalition of them for Colorado. So we help residents buy their own park and own it as a collective. So it becomes a cooperative business that's nonprofit. So yeah, there is a model to do that, and it's awesome.
Yeah, so I think it's just, that's something we should like pay attention to, especially if in the pipeline, there might be a recommendation on building one. You know, I just want to reiterate, Ponderosa is not a mobile home park, so like, you know, that's.
It partially is still,
But
but it's
Yeah,
making
that's
its
fine.
way.
Yeah.
Mostly it's still.
It's just like that development, you know, it's an evolving and rare housing type. I think it's just something we should pay attention to.
Any other final thoughts before we wrap up for the night? Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move the board to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? Sarah?
Favor.
All right.
She's already hung up.
Nice to hear you.
Thanks for including me. Nice to virtually see you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
I'm excited for that.